Hi all, my name's Chris Bishop. I am a lecturer in strength and conditioning at the London Sport Institute at Middlesex. Strength and conditioning is a sub-discipline of sport and exercise science, and I will be talking to you guys today about whether multiple choice questionnaires are an effective method for student learning, particularly those students in year one. So I inherited the module SES 1241 this year, so I'm module leader for that, and it is the Fundamentals of Health and Fitness Training module. So the current assessment criteria is as follows. We have 3 assessments. The first is a practical exam where the students are required to perform a few exercises in the weight room to demonstrate their competence. The second is the multiple choice questionnaire. Okay, it's an online nutrition exam, and this is the one I'll be talking about and referring to throughout this presentation. The third one is a 3-month case study that the students have to present to us at the end of the academic year. Now, as you can see from those stats at the bottom of the slide, 84% of our students, our first year students this year, scored either a first or a 2-1 in the MCQ. And when you compare that to either 31% or 37% for the other 2 assessments, it's pretty easy to see that the difference is massive, and the spread of results is not reflective of the patterns going through the other 2 assessments, and it probably indicates that actually the way it's set up at the moment is just too easy for them. So how it is set up at the moment is that when the online quiz goes live, the students have 1 week to complete the exam. There's a 25-minute time limit on the assessment, but that is the only restriction. Okay, so they can kind of go away, complete the exam at home, and effectively them doing it in their own time means it's open book. So I think when looking at the results and thinking about how it's currently set up, it's safe to say that it's probably too easy at the moment, and it's probably not a very good reflection of student learning in this area of the module. So if we kind of go to the literature, I'm going to sort of briefly discuss some of the pros and cons of MCQs, and I definitely found more in the literature identifying limitations of them than I did the benefits. So again, if we think about the way it's set up at the moment and how the students just go away and complete it open book kind of whenever they want, I don't really think this is very well matching up with, or it's not doing a very good job matching up with the learning outcomes for the module. I don't think it demonstrates their level of understanding, and furthermore, there is a slide or 2 that we want the students to include in their final assessment strategy, that 3-month case study on nutrition, and I feel that this isn't being represented as well as it could be in that case study presentation from a lot of students. And perhaps that's because their level of understanding is not what we want it to be, and maybe that's because we're assessing them in the wrong way. Again, there's some references there from Nickel, Hammond, Rodiger and Marsh that have suggested that MCQs are perhaps more associated with surface learning, sometimes reduced preparation time for the exam, and potentially as well a false level of knowledge, because a student can walk into a multiple choice exam, have no idea what the answer is to one of the questions, but guess correctly, and that's just blind luck really. And there's this concept of hindrance of critical thinking as well that Stanger Hall identified, and I think that's an interesting one, because I think if an MCQ is set up correctly, it can be very, very beneficial and assess the student's understanding well. That being said, it's probably not set up that way right now, and there probably is no concept of critical thinking required, especially when it's effectively an open book exam or a completion whenever you want. That being said, the flip side to that is that Chan and Kennedy said that the MCQs can provide similar scores to similar constructed response exams, and that was in economics students. And I quite like the idea that Pettijohn and Sacco suggested, which was if you manipulate the order of the questions so that the order of the questions do not necessarily reflect the order in which the students learnt the material. This again makes it harder for the students to perhaps associate some of the answers to the questions being asked. So that again might have an interesting bearing on potential results. I think the bottom line to remember here is that the way it is set up at the moment is it's not matching up with the learning outcomes for the module, and it's not going to be a good reflection of their understanding and their knowledge. So we definitely, I think, next year want to change this, or I want to change this as module leader, but we do necessarily have some challenges, and I think class size is potentially one of them. We've got 160 plus students, so there's a lot of students there to think about, providing alterations to, and if we wanted to potentially go down the line of a huge drastic change, without sort of trialing it or piloting it, new assessments can potentially be tough to pilot, and particularly alongside such big groups. Time is a potential factor, maybe. We've got quite a lot of content material to get throughout the year for this module, and we could potentially use some seminar and lab-based time to complete, an in-class exam-based scenario for this assessment, but potentially something has to give in the content to allow that to happen. And I'm not saying that's not what I should do, I'm just saying that just needs to be weighed up. And ultimately finding a balance as well. These are first year students. We're only looking for a very, very basic understanding, because ultimately it's a sports science, it's a strength and conditioning module. We're not trying to create nutritionists. That's something that we definitely don't advocate. And the level of knowledge that they need as sports scientists, as strength and conditioning coaches, is pretty, it's pretty vague at this point. We don't need masses and masses of detail. Therefore, do we need an extremely, detailed, in-depth level of assessment when, we're not building these students to be nutritionists ultimately? Okay, so potential solutions. We could keep this multiple choice questionnaire, and as we said, if they're designed appropriately, it can be an effective method of assessment. So we could build in a closed book kind of in-class exam scenario for this assessment. I quite like the idea of that, kind of almost as a first stage. And then we've got the option of comparing results with the previous year. I also like the idea of students perhaps creating a theoretical case study. If we give the students some information surrounding an athlete or a client, and ask them to come up with sort of a weekly nutrition plan for that person based on the information we give them, it gives them the chance to show us that they understand how to spread the key macronutrients across a weekly eating plan, and gives them the opportunity to demonstrate that they know that things like protein intake perhaps need to be manipulated for those clients or athletes who are involved in heavy resistance training. Group presentations or group wikis, these are other options for assessments we could do, and again, these potentially tick the box of students kind of having to delve a little deeper into assessments within technology and innovation within technology. So these are all potential options moving forward. What I have decided on moving forward, I think, is that we know that the way it's set up right now, it's a poor reflection, I think, of student understanding, student learning, and something definitely has to change. So next year, what I'm potentially proposing is that we keep the multiple choice questionnaire set up, but I change it to an in-class closed book exam gives me the chance to compare stats to previous years and see whether or not there's been a significant change or not. Option 2 would be, I like the idea of this theoretical case study. You know, it creates a problem-based learning environment for the student, and it gives them the opportunity to kind of put their own individual stamp on demonstrating that they understand some of the basics and fundamentals surrounding nutrition. And ultimately, you know, if we don't get a big change, or we think the change is perhaps too big next year with the concept of the multiple choice exam, then we've got the option to manipulate this further with stage 2 the year after that. So it could be a case of trial and error, really, over a period of kind of, 2 to 3 years. Guys, thanks very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you very much.